We'll begin with the opening sutra verse that's in the chat. The profound and wondrous Dharma is rarely encountered, even in 100 million kalpas. Having it to hear, accept, and maintain, may I taste the truth of the Tathagata's words.
Good morning, everyone. Take a moment, if you will. And I don't think we'll unmute today, but just go onto gallery view, if you will, up in the right-hand corner where it says view. And just take a moment and look around the screen. And especially as we're coming out of our practice of sitting, can you meet each face with that spirit of presence and openness? And feeling yourself where you are right now. And also feeling how we're creating a very real space together. Maybe if you'd like, we can do a little wave. Hi. There are real people out there. It's amazing. So I feel quite fortunate to be able to be here together on this beautiful spring day. At least it's a beautiful spring day where I am. And I've started a practice over the past several months that I'm really appreciating. Every morning, I take some time after sitting to take a walk just around a park that's nearby, kind of across the street. And it's a very short walk. It's only about, 5-10 minutes max. But I do the same walk every day, and it's a dog park. So I get to say hello to the dogs, and I get to say hello to the dog people, but I don't have a dog. I get to borrow their dogs, and just walk up. And there's a great, huge valley oak, and every day I stop right by that oak, and there's moss on the trunk, and I touch that moss, and I look up at the tree and say hello. And then I continue on and go around and see the acorn woodpeckers and the different flowers and things blooming. And there's something about doing this every day and seeing the change of the season, that the little leaves that were red, green, tiny, now suddenly are big, green, full oak leaves. So this is, especially in the springtime, something you might consider, because it changes. If I miss it, I know. If I miss it, my day is different. Just this one way of connecting, a way of paying attention. But it's not just me paying attention, it's me kind of surrendering to the full lifefulness and remembering, oh yeah, it's not just out there. There's a whole lifeful field happening all the time that we're always part of. And somehow that helps me remember. And somehow I notice it makes me really happy. So I wanted to offer that practice today. And then also, speaking of practice fields and paying attention, we're coming towards the end of our very special practice time called practice period or Ango. And we've had the opportunity, over the last few weeks to pay attention a little bit more together and to support and be led by our head student, Cindy. And this is this practice of Ango or practice period. Its origins come from early Buddhism, in my understanding, where monks would travel around and practice singly or in small groups. But then when it was the rainy season, and the monsoons would come, they would find a place to gather together and practice together for a few months. So they would offer, but we've been doing our own version of this. So even though we haven't been in a temple, and it's really not such as rainy a season as we would like, nevertheless, we've had a chance to come together on Zoom and sometimes in person. And we've had a chance to sit together on Wednesday evenings, and several Sangha members have come forward to offer their understanding, their expression of practice and what that means to them. And I've been deeply touched by these expressions, each one in their own different ways. And apart from whatever may be said, there's a willingness to show up and be seen, and a willingness for others to witness. Who is this person? What is their understanding? And that's so precious. There are very few places in our lives where we can do this, where we can see and be seen. And it's this deep container of Dharma, container of practice, that can allow this support for a kind of great intimacy. And then also some of us have been sitting together in the mornings over Zoom, which also has become part of my morning routine before I take my walk. And there's something very grounding in that, even over Zoom, to simply come together in silence and to sit together. That something happens in Sangha that's different. That's different than when we sit by ourselves. And then this Saturday, we have the great opportunity to sit together in person under the trees in Chad's orchard. And if you're able to come to that, just like in my walk, there's something when we are outside in that lifefulness that happens, that's I find to be deeply supportive of practice. And the Buddha actually had a deep relationship with trees, sat under trees, was born under a tree. Outside, there's a way of practicing that something's different when we practice outside than when we practice inside. And then on Sunday, we'll have the chance to come together finally to conclude the practice period with a head student ceremony with Cindy, where she'll have a chance to express her Dharma. And for people who are there in person, we'll have a chance to ask the question live to Cindy and ask her response. So we've inherited the gift of these forms And then our presence steps up to fill them. And something in that meeting happens. And we don't really know what it is, but if we show up, something happens. And it's a great opportunity to be exploring Dharma in this way, which really is just exploring life and death together. And our main focus for this study, as many of you know, has been the commentary on the Heart Sutra by the Venerable Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away several weeks ago. And the most recent version is entitled The Other Shore, previously The Heart of Understanding. And as Jisho Roshi mentioned earlier, in this case, heart means the core or the kernel of the understanding, the heart of wisdom, the core of wisdom, and this most potent expression of insight. And there are longer expressions, prajna paramita, the expression of wisdom in 8,000 or 10,000 or 25,000 lines, but this is only a page, the Heart Sutra. It goes right there. And in Zen monasteries all over the world, including when I was practicing more monastically and living in a Zen center, we would chant it every single day. Every single day. And in our morning practice, we chant it on Fridays. But there's something that happens again in this form, in this practice, that it moves, it moves from just the head to the body, to an understanding, on a deeper level. And so prajna is wisdom, and paramita is like the perfection, the completion, the understanding. And sometimes Zen is thought of as a wisdom tradition, and in the Zendo, there's often a statue of Manjushri, who sometimes is a youth and often has a sword and cuts through the clouds of delusion. But there's also this expression of compassion. So another figure we have is Avalokiteshvara, or can be known as Kannon, or Chinrezig in Tibetan. There are many expressions, and sometimes male, sometimes female, sometimes not clear. But Avalokiteshvara is this embodiment of compassion. And part of what the name means of Avalokiteshvara and Kannon is to hear the cries of the world. The one who hears the cries of the world. And I think we've all been recently hearing the cries of the world. So how do these two figures that we inherit, this figure of wisdom, this figure of compassion, just like the practice period and the form support our connection, our expression, our deepening of understanding. How do these figures of teaching support our practice when we look out, beyond our Zoom room, beyond the Zen Center, into this wide, wide world? What is the practice of Buddhism? What is the teaching of Buddhism and Zen all about, really? And the fact that we're reading a book by Thich Nhat Hanh on wisdom, on the seeing through how things are, the cutting through, but the fact that he lived his life so much in active compassion. organizing Youth Corps in Vietnam, reaching out to world leaders in the Vietnam crisis, creating the order of interbeing to live lightly, harmoniously, adapting the teaching to explore climate change. So this teacher talking about the importance of the heart of wisdom and living this life of active compassion in the world. And in Buddhism, sometimes it's said that actually wisdom and compassion are like two wings of the bird, that you need both to fly. And this isn't theoretical. You know, as we look at what's happening in Ukraine, of course, on our minds, the heart opens, the heart goes out. How can we help? You know, but if you're also a world leader, what does that look like? To step fully in, the compassionate heart may say yes. But then there's also the wisdom. What are the unintended consequences that might be there for that? How can we see clearly? And to be just on one side or the other won't do. And Joanna Macy, you know, Buddhist teacher, ecological teacher, turning towards what's happening in the world very, very deeply, drawing on these traditions. Someone said that she said, you know, if you're too far one way or the other, notice that, and then come a bit back towards the other. Right? So if you are so deeply involved in the pain and the grief of it, that can be debilitating. Right? Maybe it's a time to step back and see this wider picture. What does wisdom say? But if you're too detached, only seeing the big picture, impermanence, change, then we lose the heart. Maybe it's time to step in. And we can start to feel for ourselves, where are we? You know, where are we in this place? And this question about, you know, wisdom and compassion, it's actually right in the center, right in the heart of the Heart Sutra. So in the sutra, you know, there's Shariputra is in the sutra, and Shariputra was one of the greatest of the Buddha's disciples traditionally, and was particularly known for his wisdom. And this is a wisdom sutra. But at the beginning of the Heart Sutra, it's actually Avalokiteshvara's Bodhisattva who's speaking. So the Bodhisattva of compassion is lecturing the disciple known for wisdom about wisdom. They're right there together. And I'll say the words as I know them from the translation I'm most familiar with, but it's Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when deeply practicing prajna paramita, clearly saw that all five aggregates in their own being are empty and thus relieved all suffering. So Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, the great Bodhisattva of compassion, when deeply practicing wisdom, deeply practicing the heart, the realization, the perfection of wisdom, clearly saw that all five aggregates, so form, feeling, perception, formation, consciousness, it's sort of a map of phenomena. The idea of all of these different elements come together to make the world. And seeing clearly in their own being are empty. And as we've discussed in earlier talks, this idea of empty doesn't mean nothingness. It simply means empty of separation. empty of own self, fluid. So he clearly saw that all these things coming together were fluid, were empty, and thus relieved all suffering. And Thich Nhat Hanh in his book says, in earlier Buddhism, you felt that there was an understanding the self was not separate, was empty in that way. But actually, it evolved to understand everything is like that. And he says, there is great joy. There is great joy in this realization. So to see this, says the great Bodhisattva of compassion, is to relieve all suffering. And to see this, says Thich Nhat Hanh, is a source of great joy. So on one hand, there is the body, there is the mind, there are the senses, there's birth, there's death, there's the Buddhist path, there's liberation. Right? This is the life as we know it. Not to negate that. But the Heart Sutra says, and there's not a body, and there's not a mind, and not senses, not birth, not path, not liberation. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, not being, not non-being. And in the sutra, there's also this line, with nothing to attain, a bodhisattva is without hindrance. And without hindrance, there is no fear. So if you think about this, the sense of heart of Great Wisdom Sutra, part of it is its heart, it's concise, but part of it, it's going straight to these core places. What is seeing through suffering? What is letting go of fear? And Thich Nhat Hanh is also saying in the book that when we are in these moments of crisis, in particular, we can get caught up in fearfulness. We can start reacting and actually make things worse. So how do we keep this perspective, this kind of equanimity, as we step forward with this heart of compassion? And there's a story about Avalokiteshvara that I've always loved, which is one version of it is that Avalokiteshvara vowed he would never rest until he had freed all beings from suffering, ended all, taken care of it, just the whole thing, get it done. And he put so much effort into it and looked closely and worked on it and was getting every bit of suffering done in the world and thought he had done it. And then suddenly looked up again and it all rushed back. And the stress of this, trying so hard, thinking you're making progress, and then suddenly, it's still there. The stress of this was so great that his head exploded into 11 pieces. And Amitabha, the Buddha of the Pure Land, saw this and stepped in to help and gave him 11 heads so he could see and so he could hear the cries of the world. And then seeing and hearing the cries of the world, he reached out to try to help even more. But his two arms weren't enough. And so his arms also, through the effort, exploded. And Amitabha came in and gave him multiple arms. And often you'll see in depictions of this, each hand holds a tool for what's needed. Is it a book? Is it a rope? Is it a lawnmower? What is it? The skillful means to help, to respond. And as we look at Ukraine, there's so much what's needed. Is it diapers for babies? And is it water? Is it transportation? And you can look on the internet and find all kinds of records of amazing, spontaneous, self-organized offerings that are stepping up. Saw mothers had left strollers parked along a subway platform, or maybe it was a train platform, so that when trains arrived from Ukraine and families stepped out, there would be strollers waiting. Or I saw footage of a huge convoy of a line of cars of people, just families who had just driven on their own from all over Europe and were basically waiting there as people crossed over to say, come with us, we'll give you a room. So there are many examples of this, that something is touched. And when there is strife or difficulty or violence, as Dojin spoke recently, there can be many traumatic after effects that are very painful. And yet there's also something that can happen. There's the opportunity sometimes in these moments of crisis or loss that we stop and we look more deeply. And you may have found that in your own life when you've suffered a loss, a deep loss. Sometimes it's debilitating, but sometimes there's also this opening or this looking more deeply. What's important? How do I want to live? And I was thinking of Dogen, our great ancestor from 13th century Japan, and that he lived in a time of great strife. And his mother died when he was 8. And it's said that he started turning towards the Dharma when he saw the incense burning at the service for his mother, and had this deep insight of, oh, this is transient, this is change. How do I live in this world in this way? And it's said too that in the Buddhist realms, they're the gods on one hand, and then humans, and on the other hand, different, more difficult births, traditionally like hungry ghosts, hell realms, animals. And you would think you would want to be born in the God realm because it's pleasure and lovely and all of that. But it's temporary in the Buddhist system. It's not going to last forever, so you can't depend on it. And it has the disadvantage in that you're so content or distracted with the various pleasures that you don't think about practice. And on the other hand, if you're so caught up with strife or getting enough food or anger, etc., on the other end, you also can't think about practice very easily. But it's said in the system that to be human is actually the place to be, because we're often, if we're fortunate, there may be stability enough and opportunity enough to actually look at this, but we're not distracted by too many pleasures and too much difficulty, but just enough pain, just enough suffering that we actually start to look and start to examine what's going on here. So again, what is this balance? This balance between wisdom and compassion. And on one hand, it's like two wings of a bird, one on each side. But the idea that they're really in together. So in our sitting practice, we may not have as many direct practices of compassion. But as we're sitting and opening to insight, opening to wisdom, part of wisdom is our deep interrelatedness. Realizing there really is no other. And out of that coming up compassion. Or as we open to compassion, feeling the same thing and opening to wisdom. And we do have this in our echo, EKO. So when we have a service and then there's a kind of dedication that we're sending our warm wishes, our wishes for end of suffering to others through that. And it's tricky being human too, because just as you'll see if you sort of peruse the internet to see what's going on, you'll see these incredible expressions, outpourings of support. And then there's some very interesting articles about people saying, oh, these people look just like us. That could be me. That could be my person next door. And the comfort level of letting people in who look just like you because you understand them. You can relate. Oh, that could be me. And that's a first step of opening the heart. There was a very interesting article just a few days ago in the New York Times, kind of profiling two different cases coming from Russia into Ukraine. So one was a family that was open, just open arms, a place to stay, food, flowers, everything. And that's really wonderful, like to really celebrate that. But they also profiled this young man from Sudan who had been studying as a pre-med student. But he kept moving into different cities in Sudan, but because of war, he just couldn't continue his studies. And so he had gone to Moscow to study. And then when the bombing started, invasion started, he felt that that was not a safe place to be. And so his plan was to come through Belarus to Poland and then on to Germany. And whereas, the first family was welcomed so warmly, he didn't realize also that the border between Poland and Belarus, partially because Belarus had sent a lot of immigrants into Poland, partially to create a crisis, as is widely understood, there was a very hard border there for him. And found himself being tossed back and forth, beaten many times, and nearly freezing to death in the forest. And then eventually was able to get through and is being kept at a safe house by a brave person in Poland, but has been told, don't go outside, it's not safe. Right. And as we were starting to look at the statistics on the Ukraine, at some point I saw the number of people coming out of Ukraine, and then also the number of people, refugees from Afghanistan previously. And I realized, oh, wait, I'm not paying attention the same way. I'm not weighing these two things equally. No. And partially to understand, I think this is for a longer talk, but there are ways that we're wired for compassion. And there are also ways that we're wired for in-group and out-group and difference as threat. And this is part of what practice and the wisdom is. Right? So from someone not me to someone like, oh, just human, just like me, despite differences of various sorts. And then ultimately, oh, not only just like me, is me, right? Is me. This is the subtle distinction between interconnection and interbeing. In our relative world, there are distinctions. We have to work with those, with wisdom and compassion. But on the other level, the ultimate level, remembering there is no distinction. Is me. Just like the oak leaf unfurling on my daily walk. What happens when we come to the world with that as our base of understanding, what shifts? So I believe this is what I would like to offer today. And taking a moment to just let that sink in and note for yourself, was there anything in particular that landed for you, that you wondered about, that you thought, no, that's not true, or let's explore together? So I'll give you a moment just to let that land and noticing how you're feeling right now too, whatever that may be. And so with that, I'd like to open the floor if we would like to explore together. Thomas, are you trying to unmute?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you for your talk, Meg. Forgive my voice, I'm sick.
I hope you feel better.
Thanks. Both for the insight into the, like me, not me, and also the wisdom and compassion, each being a wing of the same bird. For me, I've always been able to be in more like 100% kind of cold logic or 100% feeling incapacitated by suffering. And so I love this idea and would love any suggestion about how to bring them together.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There are a couple of things maybe I could offer, and I'm exploring this myself as well, these edges. Actually, this is from the research world, but several years ago at the Max Planck Institute in Germany, there was research done, and one of the people they were working with was Mathieu Ricard. Some of you may know him. He was French. He went through the Western scientific system, had a PhD in, I think, molecular genetics, biology, and but also has been a Tibetan monk for decades. So he's often used as a subject when we're looking at these different practices. But looking at the difference between empathy and compassion in the brain, and that empathy, that sense of just feeling that pain, is very hard on our system. We can't do it that long. That's where burnout comes. But if you start with that base of empathy, feeling with, and then bring in compassion, the active wishing well, the active wishing for suffering to be relieved, even if you can't actually make that happen, but it's your wish that you're consciously working with that, it activates a whole other set of, in the brain, more the pleasure center versus the pain center. And so there's some hope, some thought that, by cultivating compassion in the face of suffering actively, there's something that's able to move forward. And then another schema that I really keep coming back to is the four Brahma Viharas, or the divine abodes. So on one hand, there's loving kindness, there's sympathetic joy, there's compassion, and there's equanimity. And I think about these as loving kindness as a general friendliness, like this wishing well, right? And starting with this basic sense of wishing well, you can feel both sides. You can feel the compassion when there's suffering. You can feel the joy when there's joy. And then the fourth, equanimity, is the base. It keeps us grounded and not lost in either side or the other, but able to be fully there. So I'm just going to offer those as possible frameworks to play with a little bit. Mhm. Other thoughts?
Meg,
Yes.
David,
Hi, David.
thank you so much for your talk today. I especially want to thank you for naming what I perceived as the different response to different immigrants from different places. I think that's important to look at and think about, and how you framed it as, is me. That was really cool. I want to share a little story. Kate and I visited Japan and visited an old high school friend, a woman who had been an exchange student on Sado Island, which is the western side of Japan off the coast. And we went to the Buddhist cemetery where her parents were buried, and we chanted the Heart Sutra in English to honor them.
Oh.
And she was very moved by that, and was really and shared with her father-in-law, who happened, who we then went back to visit, and they were just kind of blown away. Oh, people chant the Heart Sutra in English even. Wow. So that was a really fun kind of connection in a Buddhist way, but without but a different language and everything. It was kind of precious. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that story.
Hi, Meg. This is Holly. Thank you for your talk.
Hi, Holly. Thank you.
I'm interested that, I've been absorbed with everything that's going on in the Ukraine, and you think, what can you do? And I think a lot of people are aware of the ability to contribute to people individually through Airbnb. You make a reservation and don't go there, obviously, but they get the money. And so I did that with a couple people, but I thought it was interesting when I started going through, and you wonder, like, well, how many of these people are, you're getting flim-flammed. I can't help but think that, which is like really terrible to think in the midst of a crisis, that maybe there's people there that are, getting money that don't really need it or whatever, and are just being opportunists. But yeah, their country's being blown up. But I just don't know sort of is it just a leap of faith, or what do you think about that?
I have heard of this, offering to do the Airbnb. So I don't have specifics about, is this a good way to go or not? I think at some point you need to look at, do research, different options. Just to the best of your knowledge, does this seem like a legitimate place to give, as far as you can tell, and then at some point, once you decide, well, I'll never know everything, but I've done my due diligence, and then let it go and just offer with your heart. And you actually don't know the ripple effects or where that's going to go, and if you're not comfortable, or you feel like you don't have enough information, maybe go through an organization where you do feel like there's there's clearer accountability. But at some point, just, whatever you're doing, once you're doing it, just even if it's a scam, that's a person, wish that person well, wish them to move beyond that, wish them freedom in heart, wish the well-being of this money, which will go also which ways that you don't even know.
No, I sent money to a young man who said he was trying to get money to buy tickets to get his family on the train. And okay, so I sent it to him, and then you get a response. I got a response back from him, and he said, "Thank you so much. Yeah, I got enough money. We've sent them off. I got to stay here and fight." And, they have little pictures of who is doing it, and this guy looked like he was maybe in his early 20s or something like that. So it's like that leap of faith is you only hope that this is all true and that it did happen the way that it happened. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for offering your support to the world. Yeah. Oh, hello, Mary. Thank you.
Hi, I wanted to say to everybody that there used to be at a Zen Center in San Francisco a priest, Vanya Palmers, who is from Switzerland. And I visited him in his homes when I went to Europe a long time ago. And so I emailed him about what the perspective is in Europe. And he said some interesting things. He said, of course, it's a terrible thing happening, but the US has done many similar things. And it's important not to forget that. And so it's the same, it's like looking out there, but looking inside. Very important, very much like what you're saying, is what he responded. So I specifically wanted to know what people think over there. And he told me. It was very interesting. And that's why, that's why this practice and the form of this practice is so important to me. Because it constantly looks inside. Thank you so much for your talk.
Mary, thank you for sharing that, and that taking that action to get other perspectives also is really important. Thank you. I see Roberta.
Thank you for your beautiful talk. That was just precious. I had awoken at 2:30 or 3 in the morning, unable to sleep. And I'd had a dream that I could call my mother. But my mother passed many years ago. And then that became realized, and I was, oh my goodness. Oh, I don't have a mother to call. and I wanted so much that comfort. I don't know, how I've been struggling with a daughter who I'm having some difficulty with, and we've been very close, and now she's into another world where we're not meeting in a sense of harmony and love. And it feels very painful, as I've shared many times. And I finally had to step out of that. She actually suggested we take a big break. So I'm looking at being a mother, I think. Where is the mother? How do we tender the world ourselves at the same time? And I'm a long time anti-war activist, many years part of a Berkeley Friends Quaker meeting, so I could do the work in that activism, and many years as a practitioner, particularly at Berkeley Zen Center, and presently here with Stone Creek. Thank goodness there's a Stone Creek. And I just wanted to say that when you spoke about the wings of the bird with wisdom and compassion, and my sense of not fitting, my mother mode is not working. I realized, oh, it's always there. The wisdom is where to look and find the compassion, even though there's something feeling amiss. Compassion is needed. So it was it's a good balance of what practice
Mhm.
meaningfully is and becomes.
Mhm.
Thank you for that. And thank you also for talking about not getting lost in the grief.
Mhm.
You may not have said lost, but
Mhm.
to come back, lean in toward the other side
Mhm.
when you're getting too far afield.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. And compassion for yourself also in a challenging
Thank
situation.
you.
Pamela's hand is raised.
Oh, thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi,
Hi.
thank you for your talk. This over the last couple of weeks, my mother unexpectedly got diagnosed with melanoma,
Mm.
and they fast tracked her, and she had surgery on Wednesday. And I had been at the to meet the surgeon, and I was at the hospital, and then she came back here for 4 days to recuperate, and she just went home last night.
Mm.
And I realized that all the taking care of that I was doing, I could really, I mean, it was natural to me, but it was definitely a true compassion in action.
Mm. Mhm.
And she's 90,
Mm.
and she made it through the surgery.
Wonderful.
And I'm just praying that they were able to get all of the melanoma. So it was really a benefit to be reminded that I was, like I said, compassion in action, just taking care and giving.
Thank you. Yeah, whatever's right in front, just meeting it. So thank you for sharing. And I wish her well, wish you well. Yeah.
Thank you.
How are we on timing, Dojin?
It's 11:22. It's about time to finish up.
I have one more. I see Brian, maybe our last one then.
Hi, thanks for your talk. You covered a lot of ground and a couple of things came up for me, but what I wanted to comment on was you were talking about compassion and how we are maybe hardwired for it. And kind of what came up for me around the Ukraine thing was, well, how can I respond? You know, I'm over here and, you know, do I just send off money to the Red Cross or whoever? And thanks to the interconnection through Facebook, which I hardly ever do, but I had seen that a friend is going to Poland. He's a photographer, and so he's going with a group of doctors, and he's done this before in Cambodia and Africa and other places where he's supporting, you know, whatever effort they're making. And you know, the Red Cross or doctors, other things weren't talking to me. But when I heard that he was going, I said, well, I think that's how I want to support, you know, because I have that connection. And so it got me thinking about Sangha and being interconnected. Like if I'm feeling like it's a faceless world that, you know, I'm trying to respond to, if I have a specific connection, then I'm more apt to react and in whatever way seems right to me because I have a connection in some way to the effort. So I find that really helpful, you know, and even hearing from the people that have talked today about, well, I did this or did that, you know, I can feel a response like, well, I could maybe, you know, look at that. So I think bottom line is the importance of Sangha and being connected that really helps. There were a lot of other things. You covered a lot of things. I appreciate the talk. So.
Thank you, Brian.
Vows that are in the chat. For great Bodhisattva vows, beings are numberless. I vow to free them Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are infinite. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is boundless. I vow to realize it. Thank you, Meg.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate your talk. Are there announcements?
Well, there's many things.
Many
coming
things.
up.
So many things.
So there's the practice half day on Saturday, the 26th, 9 to noon in Chad's Orchard, and also we'll try to do that on Zoom as well. And especially if you haven't come before and you need directions, make sure to send an email so I can get you the directions when you're coming.
And can I mention, Charlotte, also, if people would like to bring a lunch just to socialize afterwards, you can do that too. Be fun to talk to each other. Yeah.
And then
Apple
next,
blossoms will be just right.
This is for what? This is for what again?
A half day sitting next Saturday from 9 to 12 in Chad's Orchard.
and let's see, next Sunday, Cindy's the head student ceremony, the question and answer ceremony with Cindy the Shuso. That'll be, so then we'll be having a number of in-person events coming up at the Grayton Community Club. We'll try to make participation possible through Zoom, but we'll really, especially that ceremony, it's, you know, the in-person quality is really part of its life. So we really encourage people to come next week.
Let's say that for the ceremony next Sunday, you know, you're coming to enjoy and to ask a question and to support Cindy. And that's best, you know, face to face. But also at the end, we're going to have a little refreshment celebration, which also only works face to face. I cannot feed you a cookie on Zoom. So we'll be doing that too. So it really is a Sangha activity. So those who can come, please do. And we'll try to make a space, if there's time, when all the questions have gone by, those who are on Zoom can post a question in the chat. And as long as there's time for it, someone live will ask the question for you. But as you can see, it's okay if that's the only way you can do it. So we'll try to make accommodation.
And then the next week, is it April 3rd, will be Meg, I think, offering a talk and a stepping up ceremony, stepping into the head priest role ceremony, a way to honor and acknowledge that. And then the 24th, also at the Grayton Community Club, will be the receiving the precepts ceremony for 6 Sangha members. And again, another one where it's really, you know, to come together and to support the people receiving the precepts, and as a Sangha event, really encourage in-person participation. And then the last one, just to mention, is that May 1st, Dojin and I will have a stepping down ceremony, and I think a reception after that as well.
We're like making up for lost time, having lots of ceremonies. Also in April, so I think the idea moving into April, the hope is to have the in-person offering every week, except April 10th, just to begin to put this all on our radars, that the Grayton Community Club has a conflict the day before. But hopefully we're moving forward into a regular weekly in-person offering. Great. Does anyone else have announcements?
Just to say that I'm going to be on a retreat, silent retreat this coming week. So I will not be online or responding to emails, etc. But then I will be there for Saturday and Sunday.
Thank you so much. And if you'd like to stay and be in a small group, please just stay on and we'll put you in one. Take good care, everyone.